So
Sometimes I wonder if the world really deserves people like Mike Flanagan or Jennifer Kent.
you don't think they do?
I don't know. I mean, they're two people who are proving that horror can be something to be admired and not just seen as like a genre.
That's a good starting point for me.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Babadook is our actually one and only overlap.
Our combined.
It was on both of our top fives.
Yes, we retooled it a little to make it number 3. I don't know why we placed it there. I think just to have it in the middle, really.
And we wanted to be able to talk about it all.
Right.
And we're giving it its own episode because it's well deserving of it. But
I think so.
listen, the Babadook was, I think it was the first horror movie that really made me appreciate what horror could be. And it's a completely different type of horror than what we're used to. It's psychological,
Yes.
but it's also largely metaphorical. And it kind of makes you have to think a lot about it to really understand where the true horror is coming from.
It's a psychological horror movie under the guise, so to speak, of a monster film, of a creature feature.
Right.
So to speak.
Right. Yeah. And not only did the Babadook make me realize what horror could be, it was also one of the first horror movies that I remember like being like truly afraid of. And and we've talked about how we don't like jump scares, how they are largely ruining horror films. This doesn't really have any. I can't think of really a single one, maybe one. This movie doesn't rely on that kind of scare.
Right.
But somehow it both makes you afraid from the psychological aspects while also creating a monster, this haunting creature that is scary in and of itself.
Yes.
Within the confines of the film. And this movie, I have seen it countless times because I love it. I watched it with friends. I've watched it by myself a lot of times.
I've shown so many people this movie, dude.
I really can't. I don't get sick of it at all. But it's truly a terrifying story.
It really is. And it's terrifying because a lot of the fear comes from what you can't see. A lot of the fear comes from the monster who, outside of silhouettes and brief glimpses of a face, we don't truly see the monster, and that largely is related to the fact that the monster is a creation of what's in what's the mother's name? Is it Ellie?
I think it's Ellie.
Or I don't know.
Amelia.
Amelia.
The actress is Essie Davis.
Yes. It's largely a creation of what is in Amelia's mind, right?
Right.
It is the monster is a product of her grief and of her sadness, not some supernatural presence or actual monster.
Well, and it's a reflection of the dread that she is experiencing and the battle truly going on within her own psyche.
Right. It's something that, and I think this differs from a couple movies we'll talk about, and that we have talked about, kind of more with a more nihilistic approach to the story. The idea that you can't escape your problems. This movie is largely about how you can overcome these horrible things that all humans are like. Grief is one of the worst things a human can experience. Like true grief, like loss, and the grief that comes from it is one of the hardest things for humans to experience, to go through, right? It's one of the most physically, mentally exhausting and harsh things that you can put a human through. And this movie actually does cover a lot of the physical degradation of loss.
Right, and the idea that grief to a degree can prevent you from even being able to mentally and emotionally and physically handle what's required of you day to day, whether that's
Right.
parenting, whether that is, reading a book, and just this idea that this psychological monster that is created stops our main character Amelia in her tracks. Her life is at a standstill because of this monster that is haunting her.
Well, it also keeps her from truly loving her son.
Yeah.
Throughout the majority of the film, a lot of the movie is about her trying to not just cope with what's happened to her, but also to that grief, the loss she experiences, prevents her from truly being, what's the word, when you love, like, I can't think of the word, like you love not unequivocally, but you like love someone regardless of what they do. Mm-hmm. Like love it, like absolute love.
Yeah.
Right. Which is what you like. If you have a kid, you're not gonna love them and then not love them another day. Right.
Right.
You're gonna love them all the time, every time. And a lot of this movie is about her trying to kind of figure out how to do that. Right.
And realizing that she can't in the state that she's in.
Right.
And it's, we get the physical representation of it through the book and through the monster. But you're right. I mean, this story is horror really unlike any other because of the way that it explores innate human emotions and things that we really have no control over to a degree. And we see her lack of control really start to play out as she tries to gain control over her own mind and her own thoughts, but also the more simple aspects of her life, whether that's friendships or whether that's going to a birthday party, like these little things that might seem unimportant, that might seem like they're the simplest of tasks that we could go through, but because of this fight that's going on for her in her mind, and because of this thing that is hanging over her and constantly haunting her, she loses control in every way, and she loses control physically and mentally and emotionally, and we see that breakdown taking place, and we see, like you said, the loss of love for her own child. And it's the whole movie too visually is so dark and dreary, and really there's hardly any color palette at all. Very pale. Yeah, and it's the way that they use the lighting, the way that they show when they do in limited capacity the monster, it all plays in so nicely to this struggle that Amelia is going through, that really we could all fall into at some point. Right. Even outside of our own control. It's something that she has no say over. Right. And it's this constant fight that she's having to fight, and that she is throughout most of the film not winning. Right. The movie also doesn't cut any corners. No. Like her sort of mental breakdown is fully realized in the movie. I think the movie's an hour and a half, hour and 34 minutes. Throughout that hour and a half runtime, the mental, physical breakdown and kind of depreciation of Amelia is there are no gaps. Mm-hmm. Every moment feels important in that kind of that chronological breakdown. It doesn't feel like the movie has to cut any corners or skip to different parts. It all happens in the runtime that you're given. Yeah, and it makes it feel super, super effective, and it gives every scene a sense of meaning, right? Because while we're technically building character throughout this movie, it's really more we're breaking down character. Right. Right. The character is kind of initially set up pretty quick, and instead of watching the characters kind of go through these scenes and
build towards something. We're seeing them crack and falter towards the end, which I think is when I first watched it, it was something I hadn't seen very often in a movie before this one.
Well, and it's something that's not it's something that's not really explored in many other avenues. This idea that the character growth is more, catabolism. It's a breakdown physically, it's a breakdown emotionally, and we see this character who every time we get a glimpse is worse off than she was the last time we saw her, even minutes ago, right? And seeing that breakdown, seeing physically she starts to look exhausted, and as she is becoming exhausted mentally and physically, we start to see that emotional decline, and it as that happens, the film's also getting scarier. The stakes are getting higher.
The monster's taking more of a hold.
The monster is taking over her life as it's not because the monster is powerful. It's not because the monster is forcing it upon her. It's because she is slowly losing control.
Right.
And it is filling the gaps. But it's filling it with dread and fear, and kind of not really knowing how much worse it can truly get.
Right. She is feeding the monster with her decline.
Yes.
Which is, I mean, it took me a couple watches to kind of really kind of recognize what the movie was trying to say about the monster, and how, really the monster is Amelia. Amelia is the Babadook, right? She created that monster through her loss, through losing her husband when she was, I believe what happens is she's pregnant and they're driving to the hospital, and that's when her husband dies, right before she has her son Sam. And kind of that idea that, the monster is actually just a physical kind of representation of her current psyche, or her current mental state, right?
Well, and
as opposed to an actual physical creature.
It's almost a mirror of kind of the hate inside of her. It's a mirror of the grief inside of her. All of these things that she's feeling, that she's going through, it's presenting it to her in the form of the Babadook, and it's scary to think about, but also that kind of metaphorical reflection is going to be different for each one of us. We're all going to experience this movie in a different way, and I think that's part of what makes it so appealing, is that you can really interpret this movie however you want to, but what you can't change, and what this movie is really pointing out to each and every one of us, is that if you allow the darkness to take hold, it's not going to give ground, right? If you feed the worst parts of you, they're just going to grow, and that's what this is really showing. It's just as much a horror movie as it is a warning for what we can become if we're not careful. Right.
It's kind of like, you talk about having your inner demons.
Yeah.
It's like if your inner demon became a physical presence in your life, right? And one thing I really loved about this movie was how it ends. We end on, there's kind of this things kind of settle down, right? The monster's kind of contained, and we think it goes away. We think it leaves.
Right.
And then there's that moment where her son brings her the worms from the yard, and she goes into the basement, and there's that moment where something, the camera becomes the Babadook, and it rushes out towards her and takes hold of her, and she leans back. She goes, no, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. The movie doesn't specifically say that when you overcome something, it just goes away. And that scene leans into the idea that the only way for that to truly never come to form again in your life is to feed yourself with the things that can make you happy, right?
And wake up and deal with it day to day, because she realizes that it's not going away anytime soon.
Right.
She realizes that it's a daily battle, but not necessarily one. While of course it's still frightening, it's not something that has to consume your life the way that it has been. And we almost get some hope in that ending, but at the same time,
I would say the ending is full of hope.
Right, but at the same time realizing that the monster's not going anywhere. Right. The monster will be there.
Probably forever.
Probably forever. And you have to learn to fight every day against.
You have to learn that you have to see it for what it is.
Right. But
you have to approach it. And that's why the scene where she actually goes down to quote unquote feed it with worms, which are of the earth, which to me means like in order to fight something like that, you have to take something natural. What is natural, what is of the earth, things that are truly, kind of good in that they are naturally occurring, or like her son, like spending time with her son. That's what keeps the grief and the hatred and the fear at bay.
Right.
Is addressing it and going, I'm going to feed this with something of the earth, and then I'm going to move on with my day.
Yeah, exactly. Right? But it's a hard lesson because it's not comforting. It's not.
No.
It's not comfortable to have to learn the lesson that your problem, whatever it is, whatever, like you said, whatever demons you're fighting off, they're not going anywhere.
Right.
And it's not something that we as humans want to hear. We want fixes to our problems.
Right.
She wants this monster to leave her alone and leave her son alone, and of course, to a degree, she is the monster who needs to leave them alone.
Right.
But it's not. That's not something that she wants to confront, and it's not something that we want to confront in our own lives. And
it's something she has to confront.
Right.
And that's the kind of the overarching, I think, idea here is that you can't just run far enough away and then the problem is solved. But you can overcome that problem if you address it for what it is. You have to address it for what it is, take it in stride, and then you can overcome. But also, it's not something you just overcome once and then it's gone. It's something you have to every single day take a look at. You have to address it at its face, and then you can take that overcome. You can take that step to overcome. But it's not something that'll ever go away, and that's a hard lesson to learn. And I think that's one thing that horror films are so. One thing that horror films are so like full of potential, because they can take an idea like that and show you the darkest, scariest, grimiest version of it, but still have an ending like the Babadook where it says you can still the fear can be overcome, but it still has to be addressed. Yeah, it still has to be taken into account.
Yeah,
to a certain degree.
It doesn't give you an out, but it gives you the tools that you need.
Yes.
To still take care of yourself in whatever way you need the most.
Right. Fear can be overcome, but normally it's by the fact that you got to turn the lights on and look at the monster.
Right.
And this movie, I think, is probably one of the best examples of that in any horror film I've ever seen. I mean, it's on this. I think it's on both of our lists, and it's the only one we really have overlap with because it's one that's easily agreeable to say that it has a lot to say about grief
Well, and so unique in what it has to say about the human condition and what it has to say about life, and it feels kind of strange diving into a horror movie as something that can teach us lessons about life, right?
Like positive lessons about life.
It's such a strange movie in that way, but also it doesn't shy away from the worst parts of human nature, and that in and of itself is such a scary thing for us to have to confront.
Right. Dude, I really love this movie.
Yeah, I'm glad this was the one that overlapped. I think this was a great...
Yeah, a good choice for overlap.
And I'm glad that this one got its own episode. I think it kind of deserves it.
Yeah.
And not necessarily that it's... I'm not saying that it's the best of all of our films, but it's so... I don't know. I feel like this one has so much more to dive into than the other ones.
It definitely had a huge impact on me, at least. I don't know. Maybe not as, not more than other films that are on these lists, but I do remember the first time watching it just feeling so impacted and feeling like, wow, that was the first time a horror movie, made me feel more than just kind of afraid.
Yeah.
Or nihilistic. No matter what I do, I'm just, the darkness is going to get me anyway.
Well, and it seems like no matter how many times I watch this, which I hope I get to soon. And
it's been a lot of times.
This is many.
Yeah. It's fine.
It's also very rewatchable. I could watch this movie
all
the way through and immediately hit restart from beginning and watch it again and enjoy every second of it.
And get something out of it.
And get something new out of it.
Right,
Exactly.
Right.
And that's... I think that's what makes this movie really special, too.
Mm-hmm. Dude, can we talk... Okay, so we've talked about kind of how the more subtextual... Can we talk about some of the scenes that are just downright frightening in this movie? Like the car. The scene where the Babadook just kind of slowly moves out of the shadows, and then its fingers pop out. Oh man!
When it's a jacket hanging on the wall.
Yeah, dude.
And then it just starts moving forward towards Amelia, and she's laying in her bed. Yeah, and then its hands come down to the side. My gosh,
dude! Oh, dude, those scenes make me shiver.
Even the book, the way that the book changes to reflect what is happening in their life.
The scene, I think, in the first time she reads the book, she's reading off the page. And then she stops reading and just starts reading in her head. So the camera tracks through the words and we're just reading it to ourselves. That was one of the, I don't know why, but that moment was so freaking scary.
Well, and
when we're filling in the blanks ourselves and we're just reading in our head too, what the book is saying about dying and all this stuff. Man, that's I don't know why. It was so simple, but so effective.
Well, and I think it's also so scary watching her kind of turn on her own son, right?
Right.
almost and this is too morbid, but the idea of eating her own young, right? She has this deep hatred for her son,
right?
Because of he represents the loss that she has, and she's turning on him slowly at times, but we see her even at small moments from the beginning, we see her snap. And sometimes she realizes it, sometimes she doesn't, but we also get the idea that she is kind of neglecting him, not just meaning that she's ignoring him, but there's that quote where she asks her son, where did you get the firecrackers? And he says, you got them for me on the internet. And she goes, well, that's the end of the internet then. And you kind of get this idea that she's not all there. She's not taking care of him the way that she should.
She probably should.
And that's obviously that's not the monster, but so it's scary watching her mindlessness almost. And and her just I don't know, her I think that the mother Amelia herself, the monster is a reflection of her, but she is one of the scarier parts of the movie at times.
Yeah.
She is a monster for her son.
Right.
Right. And that's such a scary thing that kind of ties back to what we talked about with The Shining, of like someone that you love the most turning against you, someone that you love and trust.
Right.
Being what haunts you.
Being what
life.
is
right?
your monster.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
One thing I think this movie is a really good example of, before we kind of wrap up, is it's a great example of horror where things are happening in the background that characters might not be aware of, but that the viewer becomes aware of, where it kind of builds that the sort of tension. We talked about this a little bit in our Jump Scares Aren't Scary video last week, where we see things unfold in the background that the characters might not be fully aware of, and that creates a sort of tension or feeling of helplessness that I think is really effective as a scare tactic in horror films in general. I think it really adds a certain layer of fear to the entirety of this movie, outside of, obviously the mental and physical and emotional breakdown that we've talked about in this video.
Right, and there's so much in the way of different presentations of horror. So we get, of course, we get the psychological, we get the mental, we get the physical with the monster. We get so much visual horror as well that might not stick out on first viewing, and it all ties together so well, kind of almost completing in a way this horror story that's been being told, and the idea of like we've talked about the her seeing the monster in the police station as a coat and a top hat. A lot of this horror, a lot of these wounds, so to speak, are self-inflicted.
Right.
And that's where a lot of the personal reflection comes in, both for our character and for the viewers here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is a movie I think requires multiple viewings to kind of pick up on all those those things you might not see the first time.
Yeah.
And we mentioned this before. This is a movie that you and I have been talking about since it came out on Netflix.
For years.
It's been 6 years.
Yeah.
Like, we've been talking about this movie for the better part of 6 years now. And there's still things that...
Well, and I think it almost requires discussion. Like, it's
yes.
Of course, there is a lot of kind of internal reflection. But what really opened my eyes to kind of what we were seeing in the film was actually talking it out, like hashing out the thoughts that I had regarding the film.
Yes.
Listening to what you had to say about it, then watching it with other friends and listening what they had to say about it. It requires and deserves multiple viewings, and it deserves discussion too, because there's so much that we can take from it, both from a filmmaking standpoint, a horror genre standpoint, and really just a life standpoint.
I think this is more than likely the only movie that overlapped for us, because there is so much that when we watched it and started discussing it, I feel like the impacts that we felt were so varied and not necessarily different, but it was something that was so easy to discuss because of how impacting it was on us. And I think that it's kind of fitting that this would be the one that overlaps, because, like I said, we've been talking about it for so long, and there's things we keep kind of picking up on that we might not have initially seen.
Yeah.
And that's 6 years. Like, this movie has not lost any value. If anything, it's appreciated in value, and that's one of the best things you could ever say about any movie. I don't know what that is. Oh, it's an alarm, because it's 11 o'clock.
Sure is.
Holy shit, that scared the fuck out of me.
Same.
The video is just going to go black here for a second until we turn the alarm off.
I think it stopped recording. It did.
Well, yeah, it just stopped.
But we've got this.
Yeah, we can keep the audio, okay. And then...
Well, good, because that was fucking terrifying. Yeah. I never want that shit to happen again. When we're sitting... We're sitting in this empty...
Yeah.
Warehouse.
Can we turn the alarm off? Can you Can you go grab it real quick?
Is that freaking you out?
It's freaking me out a little bit.
I don't like.
This video is just going to be in black while we take a second here to. Hello, thank you for.
Dude, I'm a little freaked out.
Yeah, let's wrap this shit up and get out of here. Yeah, let's get the video going.
I'm just gonna. It might not look the same.
It's gonna look. This video quality is not gonna look great because we're currently pooping our pants and trying to leave. Did you hit record?
Yeah, I hit record, but I'm trying to get out of this place.
Okay, let's.
Okay, so.
Let's just hold on. Let's just wrap this up real quick.
Yeah, that was bound to happen eventually during this time of our recording.
Spooky season.
Record during the day tomorrow.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, so listen, go watch this movie if you haven't already. Go watch it with the lights on.
With the lights on, and you'll want to leave the lights on maybe when you go to sleep after this movie.
Listen, this movie. I'm trying to make this quick. I'm a little flustered.
I'm a little scared now.
I'm trying to. So this movie changed the way that I looked at horror.
Yes,
and I think there's a good reason why we have had countless discussions about it.
Yeah,
it seems like
continued countless discussions.
Year after year, if not like every few months. Yeah. This movie just comes up
at least every season, like every spooky season.
We have some reason to talk about it.
Yes.
There's still so much that it has to offer. Mm-hmm. Let's be done.
You know what? Give them the outro and let's get out of here because I want to go home.
I want to get in my bed where I'm safe under my blankies.
I want to go check my closet, make sure there's no monsters there. Check under my bed.
Check under the bed.
You know what? I'm 23 years old, and I still do that.
I'm going to turn the lights on while I walk down the stairs into my room.
100%. It's going to be kind of scary turning the lights off as we walk out of here.
It's going to be scary sleeping in the dark. It's going to be scary closing my eyes.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you liked what you saw today, if you like what you've heard, I sure didn't like what I saw.
No.
Go ahead and subscribe to our channels. We are Front Row Seats on YouTube. Mm-hmm. We are Front Row Podcasts on Spotify and Apple and Stitcher. We're also on SoundCloud if you feel like listening there. A whole bunch of different avenues you can check us out. Let us know what you think, though. Check out the movies that we're recommending to you. Maybe recommend some to us. We do want to continue to revisit horror even after Halloween. Mm-hmm. This is the nightmare before Christmas, so to speak.
Yeah.
So give us some recommendations. We'll keep it going throughout the year. This is not the last you're going to hear of our horror reviews and discussions. Maybe we'll pick some to do like real deep dives into it and long form discussions.
Leave anything. Let us know what you think about these movies in the comments. If you have any thoughts, we will reply. Obviously we love talking about movies, even if it's not Dom and I talking to each other. So be sure to do that too. We appreciate any and everything you guys have to offer. So we'll see you guys tomorrow.
Thanks, guys. Sleep tight.
Oh my gosh, dude.
Get me out of here.
There was a little bit of pee coming out me for a second there.